Welcome to another episode of Let's Make Work Happen. I'm Jennifer Cannell, and today I'm happy to welcome Emily Jacobs, Associate Director of Global Mobility and Immigration at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Hi, Emily.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Emily, before we start, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Tell us, how long have you been in the mobility industry, and how long have you been with Vertex?
Sure. So I've been with Vertex for about a year and a half now, but in mobility for about 15 years. I always find it very interesting to ask people how they got into mobility, just because it's such a unique function. So my story started right after college. I moved to Santiago, Chile, and I was getting my master's degree in Santiago. And Deloitte needed an English speaker to join their global employer services team to kind of manage engagements and also work with the INPATs, so foreigners coming into Chile for their international assignments. So that's kind of what opened the door to like what is mobility. I was at Deloitte for about 6 years in total, both in the Santiago office, and then I moved up to the US offices. And then from there, transitioned to in-house. So I've worked in several different industries, so higher ed, aerospace and defense. Now I'm at biotech, and that's one of the things I love most about global mobility specifically, is that I feel as though it does transfer across industries because a lot of the guiding principles of the program tend to be the same.
Right, right. And working for different industries, I mean, it gives you a kind of a good contrast and compare about what is important for different industries and the kind of talent that these
Exactly.
industries need. But you also get to see what the commonalities are, right? What's
Exactly. Yep.
important to everybody when it comes to things like the employee experience and what are those success factors that leadership is looking for. So you can kind of
Exactly.
have that voice and that seat at the table when they're looking for.
Exactly.
So I understand though that Vertex they're doing some groundbreaking research and developing treatments when it comes to cystic fibrosis. That must take some pretty talented and driven colleagues. What's the culture there like? And can you tell us about some of the employees there?
Yeah, so I'm glad this came up. I feel like culture specifically is something that's talked a lot about, right? Especially these days, companies pride themselves on their culture. I've never worked for a company where culture feels so lived as it does here at Vertex. Our broader HR function and the businesses truly put the patient at the center of everything that we do. So I'm not a scientist, I'm not a regulatory or commercial executive or professional, but I do feel as though the work that we do in sponsoring our employees and relocating our employees gets our talent where they need to be to support the patient. So, again, I think a lot of companies talk about that, but specifically my experience in the last year and a half at Vertex is that is truly kind of everybody's mission, is making sure that our drugs and medications and treatments are delivered to the patient successfully, and that we have an innovative pipeline. So we're not done with CF. We have an exciting few years ahead.
That's great. I know that you're working with a flexible program, and you recently worked with us to present on flexible program trends. Um, Do you think that it's this kind of culture that you have here at Vertex that makes a flexible approach ideal, in some way putting the benefit into the hands of the employee themselves rather than kind of having that one size fits all approach?
I do. I think our employee base is quite varied. I think today's world, no two individuals are the same, no two positions are the same, no two families are the same, no two relocations are the same. So I think, having a program that helps address that out of the gate, I think has been a success for us. And just allowing individuals to pick what they need most for their move. I think I mentioned in the webinar, older traditional policies had like a whole suite of benefits, but a lot of them weren't always applicable. So I think here you can kind of get the best bang for your buck in terms of the relocation benefits and pick what actually is going to help you and your family relocate successfully.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, right? Because nothing is the same. No two moves are the same. No two employees are the same. And I think we're going to continue to see that over the next couple of years as people are still and companies are still trying to figure out what the workforce is going to look like, what motivates employees, what engagement is like, what return to office looks like.
Exactly.
Companies still haven't even figured out what hybrid work schedules really looks and feels like. So as
Yeah.
they're doing that, I think these companies, particularly Vertex, that is embracing kind of that flexible approach, is in the right place to be able to kind of flex with it.
I think back to the older traditional policies, so much has changed since 2018. So
Mhm,
where we are today, even 2019 before COVID,
mhm,
we're working in a different environment. So I think a
mhm.
lot of programs now are kind of realizing the need to kind of relook at their policies and support that they're providing in the immigration and mobility space to make sure that we're kind of staying with the trends and being more
Yeah,
relevant.
that's great. What would you say is the biggest challenge though, or challenges before you made the decision to go with this new program? What information, if any, did you need to inform that decision?
For me, one of the paramounts of a successful mobility program is kind of consistency and equity. And I think at first glance, the concept of flexibility was kind of like, how can that be consistent? We want to make sure that we're
Mhm,
providing everything, equally across the program. And I think as I learned more about it, that kind of what was in my mind a challenge kind of became lesser of a challenge just because of the way that we are designing the program and design the point allocation. We're still applying that consistently, but obviously introducing the concept of flex and employee choice. So I think initially it was a challenge, but I've come around.
yeah, you're not alone because I heard that from a lot of companies. I think that was where it was slow to start, is
Yep.
companies were having a lot of trouble with they felt that it was not consistent. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of companies, they looked at, well, let's just use a couple of benefits in the flexible category until we get comfortable with it. And then I think where they looked at, well, we're already providing a lot of exceptions. So I guess
Exactly.
we're
Yeah, of
already kind of
course.
flexible in that degree.
Yeah.
And then when they saw perhaps maybe it was the technology that could support it,
Mhm.
drove some of that consistency as well. I don't know. I think it's like anything, right? Where
Yeah.
once you start to talk more and more about it and it gets socialized, it's part of the
And the
comfort
technology
level,
is
right?
huge because, I guess another initial challenge was kind of the administration of this, don't want to do this on spreadsheets. Like, how do we figure this out so that it kind of minimizes the administrative work, to administer a point system? And I think the Y-Cart technology enables that simply,
Mhm.
which is great. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. So speaking of points, and I feel like there's a missed opportunity to not have a webinar called "What's the Point" when we're talking
yeah,
about points programs.
that's a
I,
good
I
one.
just I have to somehow work that in someday.
That is a good one.
um, why a points program? That's my big question. Some companies they choose capping benefits, others keep it open ended. Sometimes but we're seeing more that are embracing that points approach like you did. Why points for you? What did you like about it?
Yeah, so I think it's agile, so you can dial up or dial down
Mhm,
the amount of points that can be provided maybe year over year or for certain populations that you need to recruit. um, there was that, but also the administration I felt like was a bit easier. I've always tended to veer away from the concept of any capped benefits in relocation just because that introduces the question of, is it gross or is it net?
mhm,
um, and then yeah, it seems a bit more complicated and that would be harder to administer than leveraging technology that easily supports a point system.
mhm. Good. So I know I already asked you this. I'm going to ask you kind of the same question, but in a different way.
Sure.
I asked you what your challenges, but if you could do something differently, what would it be? It's kind of asking the same question twice. It's cheating, but
Yeah. No, it's a good question. We rolled our new policies out in April of this year, so they haven't been out for very long. I would say from the 1,000-foot view, I love the program. I think I wouldn't do anything drastically different. I would say that we intentionally design the policies to be able to easily flex in the future when and if we need to. So that is certainly something that I would recommend. Again, this field changes, I feel like, quite rapidly depending on our environment, interest rates and recessions and, pandemics, whatever it may be, that we need to be able to kind of keep an eye on that and be ready to flex when and if needed to make some adjustments to the program.
that's good advice. I like that. That's good. So now I want you to brag.
Yeah.
Is there anything, and I want go for it. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you're most pleased about that you're
Yeah.
happy that you did in the development of the program?
Yeah, I think one of the game changers for us has been the governance of spend predictability. So I'm sure a lot of different programs had this, where you're seeing a huge uptick in exception requests,
Mhm.
during COVID, towards the end of COVID, coming out of it. And that was really skewing our budget. We have a
Mhm.
centralized budget that funds new hire relocations at least, and we needed to be able to year over year have a prediction of what the cost of the program would be. And I feel as though with the new policies this year, we have been on track with our budget. The exception requests have been extremely minimal. Um, and I think that the flexibility in the policies enables that, which I think is great.
Yeah, and that's a great point because I saw a lot of companies take advantage of the time during the pandemic to look at their policies. A
Mhm.
lot of research I found it says that a lot of companies didn't make changes to their policies, but a lot of our clients, Weicker clients, we worked with did make changes to their policies. So I'm
Mhm.
really happy to see that we were able to work with a lot of companies to evaluate their programs and say, during this time when activity was down, this is the time to right size your program and make those
Exactly.
changes that you've been so busy over the past few years. And let's lock those practices down. Let's make them kind of future proof them in a way that does support employee engagement because we don't know what the future is going to hold. And a lot of them were to make them more flexible. So
Yep.
that's great.
Yeah. Exactly. And with all those exception requests that we had, over
Mhm.
the past couple of years, we looked at that. Um, if an exception is asked 100 times, maybe it shouldn't be an exception. So, we
Mhm.
wanted to make sure that we were kind of looking at what are people asking for and kind of incorporate that into the new policies.
So now that you've done all this great work, what's on the horizon for you?
Yeah. So we,
Coreflex or otherwise? Any
yep.
vacations?
So just a couple weeks ago, we rolled out new international transfer policies, which was
Mhm.
great. On the horizon, though, we are looking at our assignment policies. We have a pretty small population of traditional international assignments, but I do think that those policies could be kind of refreshed as well. And then something that will be new to our portfolio of policies is a non-US intra-country policy. So we've seen an uptick in requests for, which totally makes sense. I'm surprised that, this isn't kind of bigger in this field, but it certainly comes up. So people move from Lyon to Paris, for example, and we don't really have today kind of a robust policy to support that. So excited to kind of dig in there. And I know Weikart's done some surveys and has some information about kind of this growing need in the market. So we'll certainly be looking for that.
Absolutely. It was our one of our key trends for this year, and I think it's only going to increase over
Yeah,
the next year as well. So looking forward to working with you on that.
yeah.
Are you looking as you go into that, are you looking at more core flex across the board for your programs?
You know, so we didn't implement Core Flex with our cross-border international transfer
Mhm.
policies just because I don't know, we may get there eventually, but
Mhm.
I feel as though people are more comfortable making
Mhm.
decisions moving within their country. Cross-border,
Mhm.
you don't know what you don't know. So that's kind of we took a more traditional approach.
Mhm.
Because our new policies will be intra-country, it may be something that we look at applying.
Right, right. And you're not alone in that respect.
Yep,
It's all about what's right for your company and your
yep,
company's culture. So I fully support that and respect it.
yep.
Um, so we talked about the recent webinar. You presented with our practice leader Gina, and
Hmm.
we received a lot of questions. I was very impressed at the number of questions that we had, but the depth of the questions. I mean,
Right.
people were very interested in even just the mechanics of how the points were evaluated, and really great questions from the people who participated.
Yes.
And there was one that came up repeatedly, so I just thought it was worth asking here again.
Mhm.
And that was, what guidance have you provided to your own leadership to help them determine how many points to provide? Would you mind sharing a little bit of
Yeah.
behind the curtain on that
So
one?
great question. So we actually determine the points centrally, and that was intentional. Different businesses are at different stages. They may have different priorities, and we didn't want the employee experience to be impacted by the number of points that a business was maybe willing to provide to them. So we took the centralized approach. We determined the point value, and we haven't had pushback. It's all pretty. It's been pretty well accepted across the business.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing that. So we're coming up on our time, and Emily, this is where we always we finish our videos with the big question, and that is, Emily, how do you make work happen?
So I think I make work happen collaboratively. Our function touches so many different areas across the organization, the businesses themselves, TA, HR, finance, payroll, stock, you name it, that we really can't do what we do in a silo. So collaboration is key.
Collaboration. I can agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep. As somebody who's personally collaborated with you, I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to more
Okay.
of that in the next year. And I've enjoyed collaborating with you on this
Yeah.
video. And until our next conversation, thank you very much for this and for sharing again with all of us here. I ask everyone to please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, so you don't miss any episodes. And thank you for watching. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thanks for
And
having me.
we'll see everyone next time.